Hey everybody, welcome to So Awkward. It's me, Don, and I'm here with some comic books. Because I thought it might be fun. I'm just doing quarantine videos at this point. I don't know if it's to entertain you, or to entertain me. Or to entertain neither of us. Anyway, I have a huge comic book collection. I'm a comic book fanatic. It's been a few years since I've really bought much, but I mean, I'm 40. I'll be 43 this month, and I've been collecting comics for about 4 decades at this point. I mean, I probably didn't start when I was 4, but 3.5 decades probably. And I have a huge comic book collection, and this is just, I've got right here, I've got 3 short boxes, 1 long box. I probably have a few dozen downstairs in my storage compartment. I have some that I can't access. They're piled up in my closet. And I just thought it would be fun or interesting to grab a few of them and just randomly look at some comics and see what I have and if I have any anecdotes about them. There are very few. I'm a very shy, quiet guy. I don't have much to say. Just find me at a party. I don't know. I'm gonna stand in the corner and not have anything. But there are a few things that I can go on and on about for hours. And movies, video games to a certain extent, and comics. There used to be probably a time in my life where you could say Avengers 174, and I'd be able to say who wrote it and who drew it. It's been a few years since I really had that. I think probably Jim Shooter, John Buscema, maybe. I don't remember. I don't know. But anyway, just let's see what I got. I thought it might be fun. Randomly. Ooh, X-Force number 1. Not even, this is a beat up. At one point this may have been worth money. This is probably now worth like 50 cents. It's probably worth like $10. X-Force number 1, Rob Liefeld. Nothing really sums up 90s comics more than 2 words, Rob Liefeld. Who I follow on Instagram. He's working right now. He's in quarantine, but he's working on a G.I. Joe comic series, miniseries, which there's going to be some G.I. Joe in these boxes. I guarantee it, because I have thousands of G.I. Joe comics. There aren't even 1,000 G.I. Joe comics. There might be. So Rob Liefeld was a guy. I don't even know how you can sum up Rob Liefeld. So back in the day, during the Depression, comics really became popular, and they're fine artists. People who were trained artists became comic book artists because it was work. And then they were so great, like, because they were trained artists, like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita, all these people, Gil Sprang, and they inspired a generation of people who learned how to draw by drawing comics. And Rob Liefeld really was the archetype of that. An insane amount. Like, if Rob Liefeld had gone to art school, he would have been amazing. But anyway, so he became an incredibly popular artist on the X-Men. And once you become an incredibly popular artist, and in the 90s, you got your own title. So they created another X title, because there was Uncanny X-Men, and then they created X-Men for Jim Lee, because he was even more popular than Rob Liefeld. And I don't remember what was first, X-Men or X-Force. But anyway, cool comic. What else do I got? Find something interesting. Ninth Man. Ninth Man number 2, which is probably more rare than number 1. I have number 1 in here somewhere. This is, Larry Hama, who is most popular for basically creating G.I. Joe, which we've already talked about. So somehow every comic book I pull out is going to be, I'm going to relate to G.I. Joe. And Ron Wagner, the artist. Ninth Man, I don't even know how to fucking pronounce it, was some kind of story series about, like, it was after, like, the apocalypse, like the Third World War, which was a big thing in 90s comics. And I don't even remember how old I was, but I loved G.I. Joe, so I bought every issue of Ninth Man. I don't own all the ones I bought. A few years ago, like, I rebought the entire series on eBay, back when eBay used to be cheap. When I was in college, when eBay first came out, it was a gold mine for comics. So I got, like, the entire series of Ninth Man or whatever it's called for like $20. But as a kid, it was like too cerebral, which is why you've never heard of it, and there's no movies about it, and it didn't catch on. Maybe there was like 50 issues, if that. Maybe there were like 30. But it's a pretty good comic. And I have, more Ninth Man. If Larry Ham is watching, and I did meet. In fact, I believe I have a video of me meeting Larry Hama, who is one of my idols. I should have asked him, how the fuck do you pronounce Ninth Man? Dreadstar. All of my Dreadstar comics. Are you a Marvel film fan? Then maybe you've heard of Jim Starlin. Probably not, but if you watch the Marvel films, he's mentioned a lot of the credits because he was the creator of Thanos. And there used to be an imprint by Marvel, which was for independently owned comics. Epic. And Larry Hama and Jim Starlin did his own series called Dreadstar, and it was basically Adam Warlock versus Thanos, but it's probably the greatest sci-fi comic book series of all time. It's brilliant. So there's this character, the Lord High Papal, or something like that, and he was the head of some church that took over the universe, which, yes, also happened in the Thanos comics. There was a church that was Adam Warlock in the future, the Magus, and blah, blah, blah. So Dreadstar was a rebel who tried to take down this church that was subjugating people all over the universe, and it's amazing. I bet you could buy I own the entire Thanos, even the Peter David series, the issues. So after Jim Starlin told his story, but it must have been making money, so I guess the publisher probably said, well, let's keep going. So he stepped back. I think he became like the editor or something, and Peter David, I don't know who the artist was, took it over, and Peter David is a very good writer. But he turned it into a sitcom. It was awful. But anyway, I bet you could buy the entire Dreadstar series on eBay right now, and it's amazing. It's brilliant. I recommend it. Gru, Hell on Earth, number 1 of 4. Gru, God, speaking of epic, I think Gru started as an epic title. Mark Evanier and Sergio Aragones. He's best known as a Mad Magazine artist, but arguably the greatest cartoonist of all time. His artwork is amazing. Yeah, Gru has been being. This might be 30 years now worth of Gru. And they're always it's a parody of like Conan the Barbarian. They're very funny. The artwork's great. The writing is awesome. There's always like great poems and songs. Let's go to box number 2. Box number 1 is kind of a dud. No offense to Gru or any of those others. Empty envelope. The West Coast Avengers number 2. Somewhere in these boxes I have a complete set of West Coast Avenger comics. So everybody's heard of the Avengers. Avengers was started in like the 60s, and there's now movies about it. West Coast Avengers became popular enough that I think sometime in like the mid 80s, early 90s, there was a spin-off called the West Coast Avengers. They were located, somewhere in LA. And I believe I have somewhere a complete set of the West Coast Avengers. Not as popular, but I enjoyed it more. It was just more fun, and it was like Iron Man, Vision, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye. I think was the lead until he left and became the leader of the Great Lakes Avengers, which maybe we'll get into. Hopefully not. But the West Coast Avengers was a lot of fun, and especially when John Byrne took it over, I guarantee we're going to run into a John Byrne comic. He's my favorite comic book artist of all time. Another Gru. Daredevil. There's a Frank Miller Daredevil. That's Elektra. Frank Miller is a legend, one of the greatest comic book writer and artists of all time. G.I. Joe, Special Missions. So G.I. Joe was a very popular comic, and then they released a spin-off called G.I. Joe Special Missions. Because Larry Hama, who basically, G.I. Joe was created to sell toys and a cartoon and comic. It was created to make money for merchandising. And they happened to be lucky enough that there's a whole, the writer who they got to write the comic book series, and I believe he was like low on the totem pole because nobody wanted to write this. I'm not going to write a toy series. But they found, they were lucky enough to get Larry Hama, and he was a former veteran. He was in the Vietnam War. Brilliant writer, and he wrote a toy comic book line that was better than it had any right to be. And then it was really popular, so they later spun it off into Special Missions, which was, they basically, I don't even know if this had an editor. They let Larry Hama do whatever he wanted, and he wrote, because I loved G.I. Joe, but it was also silly, and it was mainly to sell toys, whereas Special Missions was just Larry Hama writing actual war comics with G.I. Joe characters. Go on eBay and try to get a complete set of Special Missions, because one of the best comic series ever. It's amazing. It's brilliant. And I don't know who that started with art by Herb Trimpe, which is great. More Special Missions. Savage Dragon number 1. Oh shit! This is my signed by Eric Larson himself. I got. I guess now I have to talk about Image Comics. So in the 90s, as I mentioned, Rob Liefeld and Jim Lee, Eric Larson. So in the 90s is when comics just took off and it's when collectors and they started making movies, like really shitty movies. So there were, that was when the credits, like who wrote and especially who drew the comics, became just as important as, like, it was more important that it was Todd McFarlane drawing Spider-Man than it was that it was Spider-Man. So the names, the credits became important. So, and I guess they were underpaid, or they felt they were. So there was like 7 dudes from Marvel who were the most popular comic book artists of the day, left Marvel, and they started their own company called Image. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but Eric Larson's character was the Savage Dragon, and it's awesome. He's a guy, he's green, and he's got a fin on his head, so he's a dragon. And this was like, God. So this is issue number 1. 1993. So that's what, 17 years ago. He's still writing and drawing every issue. It's still coming out, so he's been doing it for 17 years. Good on ya. And I met him at a convention a few years ago, and there's his signature, and it's pretty sweet. I should have this in a bag with a board, but I don't. Here's another Savage Dragon. Oh, these must all be from, this must be my Eric Larson stash, because here is the Doom Patrol number 6, signed by Eric Larson. Maybe number 6. This must have been his first issue drawing Doom Patrol. Pretty cool. I'm not even gonna try to describe Doom Patrol, but somewhere in these boxes I have a complete set of, I don't know, maybe this 3rd version of Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol has been just over and over again. There's been so many different versions of Doom Patrol. G.I. Joe. Superman number, Funeral for a Friend number 8. This is Superman number 77. This was after Superman died and he came back. This is somehow in the Funeral for a Friend storyline, but I don't remember anything about it. But this one is signed by Dan Jurgens. Great writer, artist, Dan Jurgens. Very cool. And oh, shit. Here we have the Infinity Gauntlet number 1. Everybody at this point knows of the Avengers and Thanos and the Infinity Stones. This is the issue that started it all, by Jim Starlin, drawn by George Perez. Classic. I would love, and my holy grail of comic book personalities I'd love to meet and have get their autograph. I've met Larry Hama. I've met Eric Larson. I've met a few. I would love to meet Jim Starlin, John Byrne, Todd McFarlane, and Jim Lee. That might be with the if I have to think of a 5th, Mike Mignola. All right, one of my all-time favorite comics ever. One of the greatest storylines ever. You've seen the movies. It doesn't hold a candle to the comic story. Namor number 1. Written and drawn by John Byrne. I don't have much. I'm not even going to try to talk about. So back in the 90s, this is before Image. I remember there was like Spider-Man number 1 came out with Todd McFarlane. There was a X-Men number 1, Jim Lee, Chris Claremont. There was just this line of books that came out, and they had a contest and I don't remember how you won, but the winner somehow there was like a line of books. Let's say there were 6 books that came out at this time, and there was some kind of contest where you did something, and you won lunch with a creator from one of the books, and one of them was John Byrne. And then later, like a couple months, because this was like a few months going on, and they later announced, "Oh, John Byrne you can't win lunch with John Byrne," because I guess John Byrne didn't want to have lunch with one of the unwashed masses who read his fucking comic books, which maybe makes me respect John Byrne more. I don't know. I'm assuming they announced this contest without telling anybody, and then John was like, I don't want to fucking have lunch. I don't know. I'm sure they paid for lunch, John. Anyway, I don't know if did anybody win that? Who won one of those contests? Who won lunch with Jim Valentino? Comment down below. I'd love to hear one of those stories. I'm only on book 2. Alright, let's hurry it up. Let's find something interesting. Man Number 1, signed by Larry Hama. There you go. More Daredevil. My favorite comics ever. Trencher. God. Trencher number 2. I have Trencher number 1, so I have an entire set of Trencher comics, which isn't hard to assemble, because I think there were only like 6 of them. So, I talked about Image a little bit. The 7 most popular comic book characters of the day came together and they formed their own company, and it was huge. They sold millions of copies, and then after a few months after they were popular, they solicited titles from some of their heroes, like Mike Grell, Keith Giffen, in the case of Trencher. So they invited these legends to make books for them as well, because they were all creator-owned titles. So they invited people they respected and loved to create their own titles for their new company, and then they immediately canceled them all. Trencher was one of them, because I'm sure they sold a lot, but they didn't sell in the millions. They probably just sold hundreds of thousands, and they probably make a lot of money, but and Trencher was one of the... Trencher was... He was dead, and he repossessed souls of superheroes who weren't supposed to have been reincarnated, or the whole concept was just weird, but it's incredibly funny, and the artwork is awesome, and Keith Giffen is a mad genius. And I bet you can get the entire Trencher set on eBay for like $20. And I recommend it. It's insane shit, but it's great. Don't know what that was. It was a letter. Alright, let's go to box number 3. Let's move it along. Is anybody even still watching this? Black Panther number 1 by Jack Kirby. God. You've all heard of Black Panther. I don't need to explain Black Panther. So, my God, when did this come out? Sometime in the 70s? First issue of the all-new exciting Black Panther. He's black. Now it says he's back. I read that wrong. As only Jack Kirby can do it. So this isn't the first appearance. I'm sure Black Panther appeared in like the Avengers or Fantastic Four or something. But anyway, here's the first issue of Black Panther. Pretty cool. Don't know if that's worth anything. Probably not, because comic books are not worth anything anymore. Oh, here's some old Star Wars comics from the late 70s, early 80s. So, God, this if you can find the early Marvel Star Wars comics on eBay, buy them because they're fucking weird. So the first 3 or 4 issues were a retelling of A New Hope, Episode 4, the first Star Wars film, and then from there they had to keep making comics because it was an ongoing series, not a limited series. So they just got weird. Because imagine if it was 1979 and you were Roy Thomas or Howard Chaykin and you were tasked with continuing Star Wars. So what they did was they just went fucking insane. They're weird as hell. Especially, it's the first appearance of like Bucky O'Hare, I think. Just weird bunny motherfucker. But they are, I mean, the art's great. They're a lot of fun. In this issue, The Deadly Mission of Luke Skywalker. It's not Bucky O'Hare. It's, I don't remember his name. But they're just weird as hell. And there's like a bunny Jedi. But they're fun. Check them out. God, the Max, more Image Comics. This is Sam Keith. It's possible if somebody is like 30, maybe you've heard of the Max. Or they had there was an MTV cartoon in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. He was a bunny who... I'm not even going to try to explain the Max, but the Max is awesome. And I somewhere in here I have basically every issue of the Max. I never understood the storyline because it was weird as hell. Sam Keith, the artist. Bill Messner-Loebs, I believe, was the writer. Here's Hellboy number 1. Y'all have heard of Hellboy. I mean, there have been a few movies about Hellboy. I love Hellboy. Started as a miniseries conceived by Mike Mignola, but the first writer was John Byrne. Very cool character, still going on, although he's been dead for a while. Here we've got the first issue of Booster Gold, one of my favorite comic book characters of all time, written and drawn and created by Dan Jurgens, and this is signed by Dan Jurgens. I've had Dan Jurgens sign. Dan Jurgens, there's some local convention in Minnesota. I don't know, and Dan Jurgens is always there, so, and I've gone the past few years, and every time I go, I have Dan Jurgens sign 2 comics. The first time, it was the first and last issue of Booster Gold. Then the next year was the second to last issue of Booster. So I was slowly trying to get him to sign every Booster Gold comic. So Booster Gold is a guy, he's in the future, like 100 or 200 years in the future, and he's bored because it's a utopia, and he reads about the history of 21st century superheroes, which they don't have in the future because it's a utopia and it's peace. So he goes back in time, and he uses future technology. He goes back in time, and he has like a super suit because he wants to be a superhero. And that's the premise of the... And it's great because he's an asshole. He's like arrogant, who's just pretending to be a superhero. But then he eventually becomes a superhero. And here is Spawn number 9. Signed by Neil Gaiman. This one was written by Neil Gaiman. This is the first appearance of Angela. I'm not going to try to explain that. Here is Wolverine number 1. Written by Chris Claremont, I believe, and drawn by John Buscema. Very cool comic. More Spawn. A bunch of old Amazing Spider-Mans by Todd McFarlane. Great stuff. American Flag #1 by Howard Chaykin. I believe signed by Howard Chaykin. This is another like dystopian comic in the future. John Carter, Warlord. Oh, here is, I mentioned before, X-Men #1 by Jim Lee. This is at the time, and possibly still, I think Spawn #1 outsold it, but for a while this was the #1 selling comic book of all time. And this is, I'll pull it out because this cover, so this comic came out and there were like 8 different covers or something, but this one, you pull it out and it's got every, very cool. That might be the thumbnail for this video. Although I will never fucking edit this together because I've been talking for like an hour about ridiculous comics. Anyway, someday I'd love to go to a convention and have Jim Lee sign this because Jim Lee is just amazing. He is now like the editor-in-chief of DC Comics. He's a millionaire. Alpha Flight #1. I have an entire collection of Alpha Fight, which was really cool. Sandman. A bunch of Sandman comics, which was Neil Gaiman's thing. Oh, this is here. I've got a story for this one. I've got a real X-Men #139, early Byrne Claremont X-Men title. This is the first. This is not the first appearance of Kitty Pryde. This was the first appearance of Kitty Pryde as an X-Men in the X-Men costume. So, and this is one of my most valuable comics. Here, let's look it up. 39 value. Oh, current value about $75 to $100. I probably have more that are worth more than that. But so I have this, and enough time has passed that I'll tell this story. I had a friend in college named Leonard DeVette, and I can write. I'm a decent writer. In college, I was very good at writing essays. I was kind of well known for being able to write fast. People would spend like weeks on like their final essays, and I would write it the day before. And I would write a 20-page essay in like a few hours. And so my friend Leonard DeVette fell in hard times, and he asked me to write an essay for him. And he said he would pay me. And I think I'm an honest guy, and I don't know why he's my friend, and I think I don't even pay me. I think I just enjoy writing. So I wrote him some essay, and his payment was, he went to a comic book store and he bought a random valuable comic. I think he just like paid $100 for some comic. And he gave me this one. And I still have it, and it's one of my most treasured comics. But yeah, it's the only time I've ever done anything like that. I don't cheat. I think I'm honest to a fault. In fact, I'm somewhat self-destructive in my honesty over the years, but I think I didn't even really give a shit. I think I just threw some words together. But it's not hard. It's not hard to write a college essay. Maybe I'll do a video on that if somebody wants to know how to write it. Basically, you find a couple books, randomly open them, choose sentences, and then as quotes, and then write your essay around those sentences. We'll talk more about that later. Insert poster here. What's the poster by Rob? I think I must have had this on my wall. It's the Blood Wolf poster. I believe this is from some Spawn comic. Because the next issue, Spawned by Walter Simonson. I wish I had that. Blood Wolf. We're not going to talk about Blood Wolf. I'll have to do a separate Image comic video at some point. Alright, let's check out the last box. The Amazing Spider-Man number 169. That's pretty old. It's in really shitty condition, so it's not worth any money. Written by Len Wein, drawn by Ross Andrew. Man, this is an old comic. 1977, the year I was born. 42 years. Very cool. West Coast Avengers number 1. Oh, here's a cool comic. Robocop versus Terminator number 1. Number 2. Sorry, I've got number 1. I've got the whole. It's a miniseries. I think there were 4 issues. The premise of this was written by Frank Miller, drawn by Walter Simonson, one of the all-time. Yeah, there's a standee in the middle. You could cut this out. You have a Terminator exoskeleton standee. Maybe I'll do that because it probably isn't worth any money. So the premise of this was, you know, obviously in all the Terminator fucking movies, they keep going back in time trying to and it never works. Just let the Terminators take over. Just let the Terminators. Just let Skynet have its day. It's probably going to do a better job than we do. So and in this one, the people who keep going back, let's go back in time and save this person. Let's save John Connor. Let's save John Connor's girlfriend. Let's save John Connor's mother. Let's save John Connor's daughter. Let's save John Connor's cousin. So in this one, they go back in time. So the good guys go back in time to kill, because they decide that Robocop was the predecessor to Skynet. So they go back in time and try to kill Robocop. And then they send a Terminator back as well to try to, I don't fucking know, but it's a cool comic. It's a lot of fun. Superman Man of Steel, John Byrne. He revamped the Superman title. Great fun. Darker Image number 1, an early Image comic. The first appearance of the Max, the first appearance of Blood Wolf, the first appearance of the Jim Lee character. I don't remember his name. Blood. What the fuck was his name? Anyway. Cool. Good fun. Bob's Burgers number 1. More Star Wars comics. What else do I got? This is all. G.I. Joe. Oh, what do we got here? What do we got here? Fantastic Four 286. Here's the start. I've got a whole collection of John Byrne. For a while, John Byrne is my favorite comic book artist of all time. One of my favorite comic book writers. And his run on Fantastic Four is amazing. So for a while there, I was trying to collect every John Byrne Fantastic Four comic, and I think I have probably 80% of them. They're brilliant. That's not the kind of thing you can probably find it on eBay, maybe, but some of them are worth a lot. Some of them are worth nothing. And he actually had 2 runs, but they're great. Here I have just a board in a bag with no comic in it. They're all facing the wrong way, so let's turn this box around. Turn the box around. More of the same. Just random, not very interesting. X-Men special double-sided issue. X-Men number 193. I don't... That looks like John Romita Jr. art. Turn the button around. Youngblood number 1. The flip cover. 2 different stories. This is the first Image comic, really, ever. There might even be rarer, because this is the second printing. I believe the first printing was Malibu, because they originally were going to be an imprint of Malibu Comics, but they had some kind of, I don't know, argument or something, or just decided that they didn't need Malibu, so they formed out on their own. But this is really the first Image comic, was Youngblood number 1 by Rob Liefeld, and it's, I mean, look at the cover, like, that's awesome. Like, the guy could draw, but he also was, I don't know. It was all, Image Comics were the Michael Bay of comics, if that makes any sense. It was all style over substance. They were terrible, but the artwork was a lot of fun. If you have to, in order to love Image Comics, you have to have been 12 years old when they first came out. More Fantastic Four. This is all Fantastic Four stuff. Star Trek X-Men crossover. I believe this was written by Scott Lobdell, drawn by Mark Silvestri. Great artist. Weird pairing. Not a great comic, if I remember correctly. Infinity Gauntlet, more of that. Dreadstar. I really need to organize, because I got Dreadstar and I got everything spread around all these damn boxes. Dooms 4. Another, like I said, Image started with 7 guys from Marvel Comics who were super popular, so they started their own company. And of course, because they were so popular, and there's so much hype around them, all of their comics sold incredibly well. So then they started to branch out immediately and have all these different spin-offs and different titles, and one of them was Dooms 4. Dooms 4, I remember hearing about before it even came out, because even before the first issue fucking came out, there was news about how Steven fucking Spielberg bought the rights to turn it into a movie. And then it didn't come out for like another 5 or 6 years or longer, because they said, oh, we're going to come out with all these titles, and then they had to hire people, and then they just took forever, and they were late. Every Image book was late. Dooms 4. Anyway, there was no fucking Steven Spielberg movie. There's never been a Dooms 4 movie. There'll never be a fucking Dooms 4 movie. I wish there was. Or not, because I have a bunch of Dooms 4 comics, because they finally came out. I don't think I've ever read any of them, because they're all terrible. The movie would have been terrible. I think Will Smith was attached or something. Will Smith was attached to something. All of these movies, all of these Image comics were supposed to be a movie. Anyway, that's 2004. That's a limited look at some of my comics, mostly from the 80s and 90s, although there was some from the 70s. Anyway, thanks for watching, and wash your hands. My hands feel disgusting and dirty from touching these, but there's no COVID on them. What was the big disease in the 70s and 80s and the 90s? There's probably AIDS. Remember AIDS? Remember when we thought AIDS was scary? Remember when we thought communism was scary? Remember when we thought vampires were scary? Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe.